Alright, this is part 2 on circles. Alright, so the last video we talked about how the standard form of circles. So now we need to talk about things that are not in standard form, but this more general form of the equation of a circle. And that's x squared plus y squared equals cx plus dy plus e is equal to 0. And c, d, and e, they're just real numbers. That's what this notation is right down here. C, d, and e are just elements of the real number system. So if our equation looks like this, we've got the equation of a circle. So make note, the coefficient of x squared and the coefficient of y squared are both 1. Alright, so let's see. Here are the directions. Find the center and the radius of our first example, x squared plus y squared plus 8x minus 6y plus 16. Now the goal is to take this and write it in standard form. The x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Alright, so that's the goal. And how we do that is an old technique called completing the square. Alright, so we're going to start by grouping the x's together. X squared plus 8x, and then plus y, group the y's, y squared minus 6y. And this 16, I'm just going to run it over to the other side, negative 16. Alright, now looking at just the x's, we want to complete the square on the x's. Everybody remember how to do that? Right, we want to add in a third term here that's going to make this perfect squared trinomial. And the way to do that is to go off to the side and do 1/2 times this number right here in front of x would be 8. So 1/2 times 8, which is 4. And then take the 4 and square that. And that's what we want to add. So we'd have x squared plus 8x. And we're going to add in 16. Then we have plus y squared minus 6y. Alright, so now we need to add a third term here to make this a perfect squared trinomial. And so we do 1/2 times, and I know the coefficient is negative 6, but just take the 6. So 1/2 times 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9, so we need to add 9. Now, you can't just add 16 and 9, right, to the left side. You got to add that to both sides. So plus 16 and plus 9. Everybody with me? We just added 16 to both sides when we completed the square on the x's, and added 9 to both sides when we completed the square on the y's. Now, by doing that, that automatically makes this first 3 terms here factor. And it's going to factor into the variable you're playing with, the sign of the middle term, and what number did you square to get this 16? Well, it was 4. Right? X squared plus 8x plus 16 factors into x plus 4 squared. Plus, and then we have, alright, now we're playing with y, then the sign of the middle term, which is minus. And what number did we square to get the 9? Well, we squared the 3. So that goes to y minus 3 squared. And then the right side just goes to 9. And now we're in our standard form. And we can say, alright, the center is negative 4 comma 3. And the radius is r equals 3. Square root of 9, which would be 3. Everybody see that? So it's the completing the square technique that we're going to use in order to take an equation that's in general form and write it so it's in standard form so we can read off the center and the radius. Alright, let's try another one. Alright, so let's get the x's together. So x squared minus 10x, and then plus y squared plus 3y. And let's subtract the 1/4 to the other side. Alright, so what are we going to add in here to complete the square on these first 2 terms? So we have x squared minus 10x. We go off to the side, do 1/2 times 10, which gives you 5. 5 squared, which gives you 25. Right, and then y squared plus 3y. Now what are we going to add here? We'll go off to the side, literally go off to the side and go 1/2 times 3, which gives you 3/2. And then take the 3/2 and square it, which gives you 9/4. So we're going to add in 9/4. Right? And don't forget to add 25 to the other side, and don't forget to add 9/4 to the other side. Right? So we added the same thing to both sides. Now, this automatically makes these first 3 terms factor into x minus 5 squared plus, alright, the next 3 terms, they factor into the letter you're playing with, the sign of the middle term, and what did we square to get 9/4? Well, we squared 3/2. So y plus 3/2 squared equals. And when you add up 1/4 plus 25 plus 9/4, right, do the math on that real quick, you're going to get 27. All right, I'll leave that math to you guys to figure out later. All right, so then the center is 5 and -3/2, and the radius is r equals the square root of 27. Right with me? So I know you thought completing the square would be done after you learn the quadratic formula, but no, it comes back as being a very useful tool to help us write equations in certain forms. All right, last example. Find the center and the radius of, now we've got 4x squared plus 4y squared plus 4x minus 4y minus 3. Now our goal would be to have a positive 1 in front of the x squared and a positive 1 in front of the y squared. So we can do that here with circles by just doing what to everything right away on both sides? By dividing everything by 4. Right? So when you do that, you would get x squared plus y squared plus x minus y minus 3/4 equals 0. All right? And then everything else stays the same. Group the x's together, so x squared plus x, and then group the y's together, y squared minus y, and move the 3/4, the constant term, to the other side. All right, so what do we need to add in here to make a perfect squared trinomial for the x's there? Well, the coefficient here is 1, so 1/2 times 1, which is a half. A half squared is a fourth, so x squared plus x, we're going to add in 1/4, right? Which we're going to add in a fourth here to the other side in just a second. Now what about this situation? All right, well, you got a 1 again still, so 1/2 times 1 is a half squared, so you can add in another fourth. Right, so we have 3/4 on the right side. We're going to add in a fourth for the x's and a fourth for the y's. That automatically makes our trinomials factor to the letter you're playing with, the sign of the middle term. What number did we square to get 1/4? We squared a half squared plus letter you're playing with, y, the sign of the middle term, the number that you squared to get 1/4 is a half, and then 3/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 would be what? 5/4. Right, and then we go. We say, all right, the center is -1/2, comma 1/2, and the radius is r equals the square root of 5/4, which, if you want to write it, is the square root of 5 over 2. All right, so that's the idea of taking an equation in general form to rewrite it in standard form. We have to use the completing the square method. We're going to do a similar thing where we take a general equation and we're going to have to use completing the square to write our equation in a standard form so we can read off information. We're going to do that for not only the circle, but we're going to do that for the parabola, the ellipse, and the hyperbola. So it's vitally important that we understand completing the square. All right, that's it. Study well. Please let me know if you have any questions.